What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the review and discussion for UnOrdinary episode 306. So, guys, this episode is honestly just another recap episode, or rather an aftermath episode from the events of some of the last fight and everything. And honestly, I think this is the best recap episode to come out of it. Basically, episode 304 was kind of weird. Episode 305, Elaine really took a lot out of it for me. Took me out of it a lot, honestly. But this one honestly felt really good. And there's not really any new development. It's really just, well, no new developments for us in terms of as the audience, but there are new developments for each of the characters involved in this episode. And I think it plays out well, because like I said, there are a few things that happen in this episode that we as the audience clearly already know about. We already know how certain things are going to go. But everyone involved doesn't have all the information that we do. And I'll kind of talk about what I mean by that when we get to parts like it. So episode 306 ends off where episode 305 ends, with Ison telling Arlo, "I don't trust you." Now, Arlo confronts Ison about his lack of trust in him, clearly angry, and Ison makes a fair point that it's because Arlo is now working for the authorities. But Arlo retaliates that he has access to knowledge that even he, as an Ison, with how skilled he may be, could never obtain. Now, I do have to be honest here, this isn't really a fair on Arlo to say this, because none of the trio is aware of this, because up until this point in the story, he's been actively avoiding them before everything. And, of course, he wouldn't just blatantly say anything like this before. When it came to what he found out was going to happen to Sarah, Blyke, Remy, and Ison, of course he wanted to step in. But beforehand, he blatantly told Remy, "I don't care, I'm sorry, keep me out of it." And Remy has kind of been avoiding him now. So I get where Arlo's coming from, but it is kind of like, they really don't have a reason to trust you right now, Arlo. They don't. We as the audience have a reason to trust you, but they don't. But he then mentions the possibility of Ison being incarcerated, or, like the rest of the vigilantes out there, just flat out murdered, which causes Ison to clearly freak out as he's starting to shake in fear. This is where John, thankfully, steps in, like Arlo's done for him in the past. And I'm really glad that what I wanted to happen came true. John tells Arlo to stop because Ison clearly gets the picture. So kind of like how Arlo always tells John, "Hey, calm down, hold yourself back. Like let's be reasonable. Let's be reasonable again." It's cool to see John doing it for Arlo this time. And like I mentioned before with wanting him to do, John does defend Arlo in this instance. He telling Ison that Arlo is the one who warned Serafina about before the authorities came to get her. And honestly, yeah, I really like that. Good on you, John. That was great of you to do that. So, awesome. So, Arlo then tells Ison that they do suspect Ison to be Remy and Blyke's accomplice, and that they were planning on expelling the three of them and putting them through the readjustment facility. Before the previous night happened, Ison clearly begins to freak the fuck out even more, since he realizes that Fury saw his and Blyke's faces unmasked, and also mentions that but really it was Kuyo, injured Byron badly as a means for negotiating and getting the three of them away from as a way for Kuyo to get the three Wellston students out of that situation, especially since Remy and Blyke were already harmed as well. But he mentions that wasn't the plan as well, but Remy saw them use Ray's lightning, to which Arlo asks what he means, immediately just like, "Hold the fuck up. What do you mean they used Ray's lightning? What does that mean?" And that's when he tells them about Ember taking Vigilante's abilities to use for themselves. Arlo clearly gets upset about this, that they would do something like this, even going as far to say Ray can't rest in peace like this. And honestly, I like this. Arlo's clearly had his doubts about Ember actually being a branch of the authorities for a long time, but he's starting to come around to that possibility. And I think this is proof that he realized. I think he is starting to realize. Well, no, it is just flat out in this chapter. He does realize, okay, no, they are connected. Something's going on. So, yeah. Now, Arlo is very upset with this, like I mentioned. So he's starting to believe the others, but I am curious if he's going to start believing Remy, and he's going to start to suspect Aunt Valerie of everything that Remy accused her of. Who knows, honestly? It would make sense. Arlo needs to ask, next time he sees her, Arlo needs to ask Remy what abilities Valerie or Vulcan had. That way they can match it up. And who knows? Arlo might run into Kuyo again, and he might ask, hey, what ability did Vulcan have? What did she look like? So, yeah. Who knows? I'm gonna be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if Arlo would still hold out for his aunt. Like I said, kids, as in teenagers, young adults, they're not just going to immediately turn on family. They're not going to want to immediately turn on family. I know I give Arlo a lot of crap, and I've given Arlo a lot of crap in the past, but I do want to be fair to him. I completely understand that he does not want to believe that, as far as we've seen, the only member of his family that he's close with could do such a horrible thing, especially to someone he respected so much. I can definitely see why Arlo doesn't want to believe that his aunt was the one who killed Ray. That his aunt is involved with a lot of shady shit that the authorities are doing. I can definitely understand why Arlo would want to not believe it. That also being said, I can understand why others would get annoyed by Arlo. I can understand why Remy would want to be like, it's right in front of your face. What is the matter with you? So, yeah. So, John then asks Arlo how Arlo doesn't know since he works for them. He asks Arlo how he doesn't know about the ability conversion and everything. But Arlo interjects stating that he works for the Bureau, not Ember. And honestly, it's a very fair point on Arlo's side. Clearly not everyone in the Bureau of Authority knows of Ember's... They know that Ember exists. They don't know that it's a secret branch of the authorities themselves. They don't know that what everyone is doing. Examples of this are Cassandra, who clearly thinks that Ray's death is not connected, and she suspects Vaughn to be a part of Ray's death, or rather an influence in Ray's death. But it seems like she doesn't realize that it was the authority themselves, because it does seem like Cassandra was very close with Ray still. And we all hate this guy, but potentially Keon also probably doesn't know about Ember's investigation, because he has said before, that's not part of my jurisdiction. I don't know what's going on with that investigation. So, and Arlo also states that only the highest officials are in on it. This could mean that Valerie is indeed very high and a true high-ranking member of the authorities in terms of status. I mentioned before in the past a while ago that I think it's more likely that Valerie might be some kind of peon for some higher group, if people like her, Byron, and Fury, are out there just, dealing amplifiers to these lower tier districts to help for testing purposes. Who knows, honestly. So, yeah. John then asks Arlo how he even found out to begin with, and Arlo mentions that Kaden told him and Sarah when they were ambushed by Spectre a while back. both John and Ison clearly recognize the name Caden, and Ison mentions that he was the one who took Remy and Blake to get healed up. John then realizes that it's most likely that he took them to Doc, and tells the two of them that Remy and Blake will be in good hands, smartly deciding to keep Doc's name out of it to leave him out of this mess. Good job, John. The last shot of this part is Ison asking Arlo what his punishment could potentially be. Ison is clearly worried at this point, and it makes sense. And honestly, it's kind of sad, honestly. Again, I know I shit on Ison a lot, but really, Ison, the only reason Ison is involved in any of this is because he wants to help his friends out, and Ison is a good friend. He's a great friend, but Ison's friends do drag him into a lot of really bad shit. They get him involved in a lot of bad things. And Ison clearly doesn't... Ison has mentioned before, he doesn't want responsibility. He just wants to have a normal life, and that's fine. It is honestly fine. Ison is kind of the opposite of Elaine in some respects, because whereas Elaine wants friendship, but none of the burden of having to follow through with when your friends get involved with crazy shit, Ison is a good friend who doesn't want to change the status quo, but wants to help his friends because he knows that it's right. But Ison is clearly worried because, like I mentioned in my reaction, when it came to John, I still don't believe that anyone ever had the worry that John would actually kill them. It was said for hyperbole a few times, but I don't think anyone ever had the freak out that John, when it came to John, the way Ison is freaking about him actually possibly being murdered by the authorities now. So, Arlo doesn't really answer the question when they ask if he can pull strings for them. He simply states it's going to take several major promotions before he could do something like that for Ison, if he even could. But he will try and see what he can find out. So honestly, good on you, Arlo. Way to look out for your people. Now Ison's in the loop. Last is Remy and Blake. And probably Kuyo, honestly. So, we then cut to the hospital, where where Valerie meets up with Byron, of course. We do get a name drop for Fury. Farah. Farah? I think that's how her name's pronounced. Farah. Now, as Byron is still recovering, Valerie mentions, like, hey, Farah said you got some pretty bad injuries. Relax, take care of yourself. So, while Byron is still recovering, though, they discuss the perpetrators, which Byron lists for description for everyone: a lightning girl, Remy, red energy beams, Blake, an orange-haired boy, Ison, and the blue swordsman who worked with Ecstatic, Kuyo. Now, Valerie tells him that Remy is Ray's younger sister, and Byron mentions how troublesome Wilson has become, expressing the desire to get rid of Vaughn, to which Valerie also brings up that Cassandra should have enough evidence to get rid of him soon. So, things are moving quickly. We clearly already saw Cassandra getting the evidence that she needed, that she said she needed. It's possible that she hasn't brought that up yet and is still reviewing all the information before she makes a full-on case on the matter. So, Byron then also mentions that Sarah managed to get away as well in the day, believing that someone must have tipped her off. Valerie becomes suspicious of this, and she remembers Arlo calling her, asking if she thought that the punishments that are dished out to people are too severe. And she asks herself if it could have been Arlo, but tells herself it couldn't have been. And that's where we see there. So, Arlo's digging is starting to Arlo's secrecy is starting to unravel, just like Valerie's control over Arlo is, and Valerie is starting to see that. So I do think we could lead to an interesting discussion. I mentioned in the reaction, depending on how they ask it, and it's going to have to be asked specifically so that Arlo can weasel his way out, but it will be very difficult for Arlo to say, for Arlo to somehow get around saying, yes, I gave away information. It's going to be very difficult for Arlo to get around it in a way where he basically says, no, I didn't tip off anyone, because he has blatantly said stuff like this before, and he has blatantly done so. So, yeah. Now, the last scene of this episode. One more thing about the Valerie thing. Valerie might confront Arlo herself. She might be like, hey, did you do this? What's going on? Now, just as much as Arlo cares about Valerie, I do believe Valerie does greatly just care about Arlo. So Valerie could very well just call Arlo, this is serious. Did you do this? And Arlo could just be like, no, I didn't. I think still 100% not out of the realm of possibility for Valerie to be like, hey, for Valerie to trick Arlo and, like, you know, have Nadia, that's her name, Nadia, like, kind of in the background supervising the whole thing, just asking him, hey, did you tip off anyone? I do think Valerie might handle this herself and talk to Arlo, but who knows? Anything could happen. The last scene is at Doc's. As Sarah and Co. are playing cards, Doc and Layla are reviewing results from the amplifier that came back from Neil's lab. Doc realizes that they do contain traces of DNA, noting this might be the source of the conversions and everything. But he also notices that the DNA sequence is almost an exact match of John's from his blood work results that Doc took samples of. So, like I said, a lot of things happening in this episode that we as the audience already know, like Cassandra having evidence to get rid of Vaughn, but also the reveal to Doc, which he most likely will tell the others about, that Jane's DNA is very close to John's. And I think Sarah will probably be like, yeah, they have John's mother captive. And that's it. Honestly, like I said, it's a discussion episode. It's an aftermath episode kind of setting things up. So honestly, I think this is much better than episode 305 and 304. Like I said, it's a lot of information that we as the audience already know, but a lot of the discussion is good, and the reveals that happen to the characters themselves and not us, the audience, I feel they are done fairly well in this instance. So yeah, I would honestly give this episode a level 7.5. It is a pretty good episode nonetheless. And, no, I'll be generous. I'll give it a 7.8, honestly. It's a discussion episode. Not really too many big reveals or anything, but the discussion amongst the characters is good. I do especially love the conclusion to Arlo, John, and Ison's conversation. And yeah, I think the payoff here is pretty well. No major developments, but characters in the story are starting to piece together things, and on all sides, and I really like that, honestly. So, yeah, let me know what you all thought down below in the comments. And as always, guys, I'll see you back tonight for episode 307. So as always, everyone, see you, Space Cowboy.